What's going on, YouTube? I'm one handy dude. Welcome back to my shop. Wow, that slab was heavy. Today, I'm going to be walking you through my process of how to break down this slab into floating shelves, and then my process and approach on how I mount the shelves onto the walls, not using any off-the-shelf, no pun intended, hardware, but an approach that is relatively cost-effective and rock solid. So, let's get to it.
My first order of business is to address the knot holes in the slab. I'll be filling them in with epoxy, but before I can do that, I need to clean them up of any loose debris. A set of picks and a small chisel make quick work of this. With the holes cleaned out, I split the slab into two equal halves by clamping down a straight edge and running my circular saw against it. First cutting at half depth, and then at full depth so I don't overheat the blade. With some siding tape, I seal off the bottoms of the knot holes. Then I mix up some epoxy and black mica powder for color. I pour some epoxy in and use a small brush to spread it around all the edges, and then leave it to cure. I'll do a second pour a few hours later, once the epoxy is partially cured, but still tacky. This way I avoid any leaks and still get a good chemical bond. Now in a perfect world, all walls will be flat, plumb, and square. But the world isn't perfect, and the wall these shelves will live on is definitely not flat. My process for fitting shelves tight to the wall requires building templates rather than scribing the shelf to the wall. This is due to the shelf mounting method I use, which I'll go into more detail later. So, while the epoxy cures, I head to the job site with some 1/8" strips of wood and CA glue in hand. I build the templates by first laying a full-length strip against the wall. I then cut smaller strips to follow the contours, working my way down the length of the shelf. Once I'm satisfied there's no gaps, I'll go ahead and glue everything down. Back in the shop, the epoxy's fully cured, and I can now move on to flattening the shelves. My joiner is not up to the task, so I pull out my slab flattening jig and flatten one face of the shelves. With one face now perfectly flat, I roll out my super cool planer table and flatten the other side, while also bringing it down to its final thickness of 1 3/4 inches. If you're curious about my planer table, go check out Matthew Peech's channel. He has a great video outlining the build process. You can find a link to the video in the description below. Now the shelves are flattened, I apply painter's tape to the back edge and the side that'll meet the wall. After clamping the template to the shelf, I carefully run my marking knife along the template to score the tape and transfer the wall contours to the shelf. Good quality floating shelf brackets are pricey, averaging around $100 each for a shelf of this size. But my method costs me a little over $20 for both shelves and is rock solid. I purchased a 6-foot length of 5/8 threaded rod from the big box store. Using my porta band, I broke it down into 6 1-foot pieces. Now, I'm not saying you need a porta band to cut these. You could use a hacksaw or a grinder, but
it'd be a lot cooler if you did.
back at the job site, I'm preparing to install the threaded rod. I set my laser level to the center of where I want the shelf to land. Using my stud finder, I find the studs and mark the location with some painter's tape. I do want to mention, I've purchased a handful of stud finders over the years. Most of them have been junk, giving false readings and generally being a letdown. However, I highly recommend this stud finder by Franklin Sensors. It's far exceeded my expectations and has become an invaluable tool in my arsenal. I'll leave an affiliate link to it and other tools I use in the description in case you're interested. That being said, I still use a thin screwdriver to poke into the drywall to find the exact edges of the studs and mark center. This is important to ensure enough meat left on both sides after drilling the hole. Speaking of drilling, I was on site before the drywall went up, so I knew there were no mechanicals running through where I'd be drilling, but if you don't already know what exactly is behind the drywall, you should cut small exploratory holes on the sides of the studs to verify you're clear. The last thing you want to do is drill into a wire or a pipe. Using a 9/16 inch bit, I drilled to a depth of 3.5 inches. That's a ½ inch for drywall and 3 inches into the 3.5 inch stud. Drilling the hole slightly undersized allows for the rod to be threaded into the stud for a more secure connection. Also, notice I leave my laser level on while drilling the holes. I'm referencing the laser line against my drill and bit to consistently drill at a very slight downwards angle. This will leave the threaded rod angled ever so slightly up, and the weight of the shells will level it out. With the holes drilled, I can install the threaded rod. I'm spraying the inside of each hole and the rods with Teflon dry lube. This isn't absolutely necessary, but I do find it helps reduce friction and annoying squeaks while installing. I thread onto 5/8 nuts, locking them in place with my wrench, and mark the ends of the rods at 3.5 inches, so I know when I'm getting close to the end. I then proceed to thread it into the first hole, repeating this same step for the other two. Notice how the laser's consistently hitting the center of each rod at the back and about an 1/8 inch below center at the front. Exactly how we want it. I do my best to drill the holes as square to the wall as I can, and occasionally I'm spot on, but other times there'll be some deviation. That's okay though, because I have an easy solution to account for this back at the shop. For now, I need to mark the exact locations the rods will be in the shelf. I do this by placing the shelf on top of the rods. Since I haven't cut the scribe on the back of the shelves yet, I check the distance from the wall to the scribe line on both ends, and adjust until they're equal. I then align a straight piece of wood on both sides of the rods, and mark a line. Back in the shop, I'm using a straight edge to mark the center of the lines I just drew, and continue to line down the back of the shelf. It's a little tough to see the lines on camera, but I assure you, they're there. Now's a moment of truth, where I can see just how close to square I drilled the holes in the wall. Using my digital angle finder, I check the angle of my center line. Off by 1.1 degrees. Pretty close, but I'll still need to account for it. I threw a jig together to help me drill straight holes. I glued a couple of blocks of wood together, using my drill press to drill perfectly square, and then marked a line showing the center of the hole. The two smaller holes are so I can screw the jig to the shelf, and ignore the hole with the X through it. I messed that one up. With the jig placed on the shelf, I zero out my digital level and insert a shim under one side of the jig. I adjust this until the level shows a change of 1.1 degrees. I then screw the jig and shim down tight. Using a 5/8 inch auger bit, I drill down through the jig. Once I can't drill any further, I remove the jig and continue drilling, repeating this process for the other 2 holes. I no longer need a straight and flat reference surface. With a 1/2 inch straight bit in my router, I hollow out the back, leaving around 3/8 of an inch on each side, and making sure to stop short of the end that'll be left exposed. Doing this will make cutting to the scribe line easier. I switch over to the jigsaw and carefully trim up to the scribe line, being sure not to go over. And with the top edge scribed, I use a flush trim bit to match the bottom to the top. And now, the shelves are done. Well, sort of. I still have to sand and finish them. So I mark the surfaces with a pencil, and then I begin to sand. And sand. And sand. And sand. And sand some more. Followed by a quick hand sanding on the live edge. To finish, I'm using Natura One Coat Clear. It's a 2-part hard wax oil that's essentially foolproof. It's quickly become my go-to finish for most projects. I really like how it highlights the wood's natural beauty without leaving an unnatural feel of a film finish. After mixing it up, I just pour some on the surface and buff it in using a white non-woven pad, following up with a cotton rag to wipe off any extra that didn't soak in. I then leave it to cure for a few days and it's ready for install. Here's a photo taken right after finishing. These slabs look beautiful. Alas, it's install day. The center rod on the upper shelf was catching inside the hole for some reason. The shelf kept wanting to teeter-totter on it, and I couldn't figure out why. Normally I'd grab a rubber mallet to persuade it into submission, but as luck would have it, I forgot to grab mine that morning. I didn't feel like driving all the way back for it either, so instead I stubbornly pressed on and shimmied it back and forth a million times, progressing ever so slightly until it was finally snug against the wall. Of course, the bottom shelf slid into its home like a glove, but I forgot to hit record, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it. Here you can see the tight fit against the cabinet and wall. Thank you for watching to the end. I hope you enjoyed seeing my process and got something out of it. If you think I earned it, do as you do on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Till next time, I'm One Handy Dude. Have a good one.